So good afternoon, Mr. Devarshi Dev. Thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to do this conversation to spread the awareness about apprenticeship and also to share your experience of doing apprenticeship the way you are doing it. Uh, as we begin our conversation, we would like to step back before we understand how are you making use of the entire apprenticeship training program. What prompted your organization to take up apprenticeship and for how long have you been doing it?
See, we have been using it for approximately now 5 to 6 years. The reason why we decided or choose to, get into this program was that there were multiple reasons. One was purely out of our industrial relation control problem. Like in some of the factories where we were operating, we had an extremely unionized and militant kind of a workforce. To manage that, we needed also a workforce which was skilled. They were able to manage the day-to-day operations and reduce our dependence on some of these, permanent workforce we had. So initially, we started more from looking at sort of diversity in our workforce in terms of skill, in terms of categories. And later we graduated to identifying a set of people from these apprentices who could later be absorbed in our workforce as probably, better option compared to some of the unskilled permanent workforce we had. So that's where we started from. And currently, we are actually thinking of something much beyond that. The new factories which we are now proposing to put up, like for example, we are setting up a fairly state-of-art large factory in Gujarat. There we are thinking of running completely without uh, permanent workforce. Our thought process is we are going to have skilled employees who would be then absorbed as management staff, and they would be part of the workforce, which would ensure that apprentices under them would be working guided properly. And over a period of time, we will continue to absorb and build our uh, employee strength in that new factory. So that's the thought process of now.
Interesting. So purely from coming in from the diversity in the workforce and also creating talent which can support the growth becomes your genesis for taking up apprenticeships. Interestingly, and you've been doing it for 5 to 6 years that you said.
True, true.
And so, how many apprentices do you deploy?
Uh, I think we must have hired approximately close to 1,000 apprentices over that time frame,
So currently, they are.
and they must have been deployed. Yeah, and got deployed across around 5 to 6 factories we have across locations. So that's what it is now.
Fantastic. So, how are you executing apprenticeships? What a kind of model that you are using to train these people? What's the duration for it, and what are the process and systems that you have created for undergoing this training?
So sorry, I couldn't hear you. If you could come again.
So, I'm saying for what is the kind of model that you're using for training and development of these people through apprenticeship? We would just like to understand what kind of a system processes that you have in place and for what duration these people are trained under apprenticeships. And of
Right.
course,
So
job roles as well, maybe.
right, right. So the purpose of taking an apprentice is obviously you take someone who has some level of skill. Like we normally tend to take diploma engineers. So that's one. Second, we have also hired people who are likely on the unskilled category types like 10 plus 2. But our experience has been that normally when you hire the unskilled category, the 10 plus 2 or 10 pass kind of people, they tend to be a bit fickle. To hold on to them becomes a challenge. However, when you take someone like a diploma engineer, uh, they are slightly more professionally tuned because they have chosen a career uh, in the manufacturing uh, sector, and they tend to be a bit more sticky compared to the completely unskilled category. So the purpose behind this was that you take a person, you observe him for 3 years uh, over a period of time, and you have proper training when the person joins you, or put him in a dojo, what we call training center or dojo, that's a Japanese term, where you train the person on the basic do's and the don'ts and the other skills required. And then you deploy him under proper supervision on the job. And you also give him certain training inputs over a period of time so that the person also is able to look at the whole thing beyond just earning a stipend. There is a learning opportunity for him. And then you look at how you can probably over that period of 3 years identify the ones who are really the ones you would probably like to absorb. Obviously, this is the opportunities you have within the system. You hire those who have actually got a proven track record over these 3 years, and then you move them into supervisory or you move them into a specialist role which are required. So I think that's the model we are following right now.
So when these people are getting trained, what are the parameters which you are looking for while you are evaluating these apprentices, or when you are assessing and monitoring the progress of these apprentices?
So it's a mix of functional as well as behavioral traits. It's very important that when you join a manufacturing company, especially something which is tied to the OEM supply chain, where you have to have just-in-time systems and you have to be extremely process-oriented, you look at the person's first thing is his discipline. Like, is the person having that industrial etiquette or industrial culture to sort of manage a workplace, discipline. Like if he is habituated to taking frequent leaves, he wants a frequent break to go back to his family, or he has a irregular work pattern. Those things are absolute no. You can't have. So the dependency on a person is extremely high when you allot him to an operational, workstation. So that's the first place you look at, first thing you look at. The second thing which you look at is the person's ability to participate in some of these activities, because being a TQM oriented company, like what kind of initiatives the person is taking in terms of giving suggestions, how many suggestions is he giving, what kind of improvement activities, which we normally call QC activities, quality circle activities, or Kaizens, which are small improvements. He is sort of volunteering for the same. And then certain activities which are more related to total employee involvement, like how much does he participate in activities which are related to morale building and other activities, and building a good work environment. So these are certain things which we evaluate the person. And yes, obviously his technical competence, wherever he has been allotted, has he the ability to manage the operations in the absence of a trained resource in that workstation. I think these are certain things which we look at, and then we take a call on the basis of the performance of the person.
And you also mentioned a while back that you give them a frequent inputs as well for their improvements. So this entire evaluation, like how frequently this evaluation is happening?
Right. Actually, if you look from an evaluation point of view, it is formally done once a year. That's the formal evaluation. However, uh, since we have a system of toolbox meeting where people every day meet before the shift, and you also review on certain parameters, because being a TQM oriented company, you have frequent reviews related to customer performance, in terms of the quality of defects or the new models which are coming. So on the basis of that, those operational parameters during the toolbox meeting, everyone gets a proper feedback that what is the person's current competence vis-a-vis the changes which are required, and the person is supposed to make whatever corrections which are required. And if a person is required to further skill up, he is given both kind of training. One is, again, he goes back to the dojo center for skill up to a new kind of process, or he is given on the job training under someone who has the requisite experience to manage the position.
So very methodical approach, I must say that, very structured way of training the people and developing their talent. And so I assume that by now you have like one batch passed out and maybe the second one should be in the process of passing out or should be soon passing out, right?
Yeah, we have had quite a few batches passing out, because if it is 6 years back, so we had quite a few batches
Quite a few batches.
passing out.
Okay.
Now, see, I'll tell you the advantages and the disadvantages of the system, both are there, right? The advantages are like you get a set of people who are flexible, they are willing to work, and you have the ability to deploy them as per what you think appropriate without the constraints of the so-called, the industrial environment you are currently operating in. The flip side to this is that sometimes the people are, fresh out of the college, or this is the first time they are in an employment. So their understanding of the industrial culture itself is weak. So many a time when a person comes first time to uh, work, they find the process not to their liking, because uh, it's not an assembly job where you sit in a air conditioned environment and you assemble some mobile phone. It's not a work environment which is honestly very comfortable. You have to work in front of furnace because it's a core industry, right? And some of the processes are semi-automatic, so there's definitely a bit of manual strain also
Okay.
on the job. So some of the people don't find it to their liking, and they tend to either drop out, or they tend to not be very serious about the commitment. But
So what's the
that's okay.
dropout rate you would have?
Frankly, it's very high. If I have to put it like this, like it's approximately 60 to 70%.
Or
It's
60,
extremely
70%
high.
people drop
Yeah,
out.
yeah, they
And do
drop
they
out.
drop out in the first 3 months, 6 months, or it's after
Yes. Normally, the trend is in the first 3 months, you have most of the dropouts moving out. Post that, normally people stabilize. They don't tend to leave. But yes, like initial shock, the system has to have that ability to manage and then quickly scale up the numbers. So the challenges which you normally face is from the sourcing point of view. For that, you need to have an extremely well-planned, methodical manpower planning, which should take care of how many people you need to hire over, whatever time frame. So the challenge is like you have these diploma students passing out at a particular point of the year, which is May, June, July. That's the time normally they pass out, right? And they will join somewhere from July onwards. But
Yeah.
the attrition normally happens during the festival months, and also it happens during the summer months, because that's the time when situation is slightly difficult in terms of the ergonomics and the working and
Environment.
environment. It's quite
Okay.
tough that time. So to manage that, you need to have a scientific way of quickly hiring and replenishing, and that's where we tend to find it sometimes a bit difficult. So uh, yeah, so till now we have managed, but I think going forward we will have to have a judicious mix of FTs, fixed-term employees, apprentices, and right now we are primarily managing on the basis of contract labor. That's how we are managing the show. But yeah, this is one area where things can improve, and if there is a sourcing model which allows you to replenish or backfill over the whole year, that helps a lot more.
Okay.
So that's
So
it.
you're looking for something like a perennial sourcing
Yeah,
model that can help you backfill these people as and when they kind of drop out.
right.
60, 70% is pretty high rate as compared to even the normal standards if I were to look at. Is it a matter of concern?
Yeah, definitely it's a matter of concern. given that you have a set of people who are not there when you really need them. Like say during festival months, there's a pre-festival months. Normally, the automobile sales starts booming,
Also
right?
peaks up
So
there in
you
April.
need
Yeah.
manpower and good quality manpower so that your defects, other things are under check, and you give the customer whatever they want. But yeah, so that's been a challenge, and we are now working on some models on how to address this issue. We are work in progress. Hopefully we'll
Would you want
see
to
what.
throw light on them? I mean, what kind of a initiative that you're planning, or?
Yeah, so we are looking at normally there's a Six Sigma project which we have now initiated along with the operations team. So we are looking at multiple things like number one, the demographic profile of the people who have quit. Like say in Chennai, if you look at normally the locals, right? So they tend to be more towards intermittent absenteeism, like they will come for some time, then they will suddenly disappear. So for that, you need to always have a buffer or manpower in excess, right? So first, from the demographic point of view. Second, we are looking at certain post positioning where probably the fatigue or the work effort is probably on the higher side. So we are trying to look like, is there a possibility of making that work environment easier? The third thing is we are looking at the compensation part, like is there something which we can do and looking at a benchmark, like is there something which is wrong with the kind of stipend we are paying, and is the surrounding industrial belt paying something which is more lucrative to these guys, right? So there are a host of things we are trying to identify, and we are going to probably look at a mix of measures which we can then deploy to probably correct this.
So you've spoken about the dropout rate, but what about the absorption rate? I think that's a happy situation to be when you are, absorbing people. So what is your absorption
See,
rate?
our absorption rate is, I won't say really high. The reason for that is like manufacturing industry, unlike the software industry, is more dependent on your capacity utilization and like it's not like you suddenly rent one extra floor space and you have so many X number of people deployed for a project or some kind of a BPO activity. It's not like that. In manufacturing, if you have to have a capacity to be expanded, then there's a fair bit of capital expenditure which needs to be incurred for that. For that, you need to have long-term planning, and then obviously there is a detailed planning to be done for that. For the normal workforce, you already have a set of people. You have permanent workforce, and permanent workforce traditionally they don't attract. Like if you look at the worker uh, category in most of the industry, the blue collar, uh, they tend to be there. They tend to be there till they retire. They are not going anywhere, right? So it's completely subject to your extra demand which is coming, right?
True,
Or
true.
the second thing is like you have the people at the officer or the management cadre level, like as and when there's a attrition, like you have an officer category, a supervisor attriting, right? Then you look at maybe one of these people could be moved up into that kind of a role, or say you need a planner, so there's a planning cell, so someone has probably put in, or there's a guy you need as a QA officer to manage something. These are the kind of positions which you will absorb them. So our absorption rate would be somewhere close to 3 to 5%. I would say that's about
So
it.
it's about 3 to 5%,
Yeah.
which is fairly decent, I would say that. Okay. So, I mean, you spoke about the current concern that you have that people tend to, drop. I mean, dropout is one of your challenges and the concern that you have. But when you were starting off the apprenticeship program, did you have any teething issues of settling down of this, or first creating a system and a process to accommodate apprenticeships, and then, conducting the apprenticeship? So, did you have any teething issues?
Not really, because see, we were always keen to have apprentices. The problem was like now things have changed, but at one point in time, dealing with board of apprentice, the government machinery was not very easy in terms of getting the requisite number of apprentices. So there was always that issue. Whereas when you have that option of deploying to some other means, you always then open up because the benefits are always there. Like when you have an apprentice, number one, you have situations where you have the flexibility, you have the skill, you have the people who are from a diverse background. So it always helps. So that thing was always from the pull factor, the requirement part, there was no concern because everyone wanted them. Yeah, the teething trouble with the union, sometimes there were some issues that, why are we deploying such people over here? Like, so some of them had this issue that since in the past we had contract labor coming from the same village, why are they not getting confirmed and why
Yeah.
we are getting these people? So
Apprentices.
you have to explain to them that the requirement in the market and from the customer has changed. You need a certain percentage of people who are skilled. So as per the skill matrix, you need a set of people who have the requisite qualification, the requisite capability. So you have to explain to the union. But yes, those things were always there. Initially, when we started, we had those dialogues, but overall, I would say it was not so much of a challenge. We settled quite okay and managed it.
Great. So it's like a well-established system now in your organization.
Yeah, more or less.
Great, great. So you had a couple of batches passing out. You said that it's. I mean, you also absorb these people as an employee. Is it okay to say that apprenticeship is part of the talent development and or hiring strategy?
Yeah, definitely. I'll put it this way that it's definitely one of the key, I'll say, framework of our hiring strategy. And the thought is being a TQM oriented company that we normally have a outlook that people should come in at an entry level and then they should move up rather than looking laterally to hire. So when you hire people laterally, there's always a challenge that the person may or may not like the culture and the person may find it difficult. And honestly, over an interview, it's very difficult to figure out whether the person is
True.
going to, be a right match for you or not. Even the best of psychometric tests or whatever you put over there or background reference sometimes doesn't work. So when you have an apprentice in the system and you have seen him working for 2, 3 years, I think that's the best way. So yeah, but when you hire these guys, you need to do some basic checks like does the person have the right profile? Certain things which we don't want. Uh, those are in the no hire kind of profile. So we need to filter that appropriately, and people should not just take them like some like dipping a bucket in the ocean and pulling out whatever is it. It shouldn't be in that manner. It should be proper screening when you are taking these people in. And if you have any red flags, it's better you cut loose at the beginning rather than you live with that problem over a period of time. So I think these are certain things which I think help if you monitor it properly.
Good. Good. So you've mentioned even some of the benefits, earlier in the conversation that, in terms of the flexibility and certain other stuff that you were mentioning. But any other qualitative and quantitative benefits that you have, seen by doing apprenticeship?
Like I mentioned, quantitative, well, in certain ways it saves you. Like you have a CSR benefit if you use for apprenticeship, that's one benefit. Second thing is you do save on certain things like um, there are certain financial benefits like ESI or PF and other things. So those things are, as put it from the financial point of view. But the bigger benefit I'd put is that you do have a set of people whom you can groom for higher responsibility within the organization. And you can, like, if you have a diploma engineer can be further sponsored for, BTech program, and you can then take him up the ladder, So if the guy is good, you can move him into a department head or maybe even a plant head position later, right? So there is a career path. But when you have a guy who's a 10 plus 2 with a contract labor background, there is a limit to which the guy can always go, and there's always a challenge in terms of moving them up because over a period of time, if the same person does the same work for 20 years, he is going to get expensive, right? So how do you move him up? How do you skill? How do you ensure the productivity increases? So I think these are the things where you have the benefit of having an apprentice training program.
Great, great. What do you have to say about the productivity of these people?
About the productivity, like I mentioned, uh, honestly, there is a challenge with the productivity part because you have attrition, you have absenteeism. So that's the part which we are trying to address through our project and trying to find if there's some answer we can have to that. But yeah, the good thing is that it gives you the flexibility, like to deploy, to ramp up, to ramp down, which you don't normally tend to have if you have a permanent workforce with you. So that's one very important thing. The second thing, which is important here, is like any category, you have some people who are really on the brighter and good side. Some are the average, and some are not so good, or I'll say there are people who are not serious. So the people who are really good, you can achieve a lot. Like you can really deploy them in some value-added position, and they can do a lot of good things for you. Like they can move into maintenance, where they can get highly skilled and they can give you good returns. Or for tooling, you get a guy who does certain things which otherwise you would be outsourcing and spending a good amount of money on. So I think the people who are really good, they make up for the rest of it. But yes, like productivity is an area where we need to also work on and further strengthen and improve.
Sure, sure, definitely. So, with 6 years of investment now in apprenticeship, what do you have to say about it? Has it paid off in the long run for your organization?
Yeah, I think apprenticeship has paid off. Like we have more or less achieved the goals which we set out when we decided to go for this apprenticeship program. So I think it has paid off for us, and now it is for us to build on it and make it further strong. So we have to study these labor code bills, like are they in conflict with some of these apprenticeship guidelines and all. So we have to study that in detail, and we have to see like going forward how well it merges into our workforce planning. So those things we're yet to get a handle on. But otherwise, as of now, we are quite satisfied with the apprenticeship program.
So, what would be your recommendation to your peers in the industry for doing apprenticeships?
So apprenticeship, I'll say yes, people should explore. I think this gives you an opportunity to identify a good talent pool, and if you have a proper grooming kind of mindset for the organization, you can avoid lateral hires and you can build a culture. And I think that's the strong point of having an apprenticeship scheme.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dev, for sharing your experience. It was wonderful to have you
Thank you.
over,
Thank
and
you so
I'm
much.
going to gain a lot of knowledge about doing apprenticeship. Thank you once again.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dev, for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.